Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Healing Chat Podcast, a series where we invite different professionals or people to share their insights on mental health. So today we're talking about something most athletes face, but few admit, performance anxiety. I've played competitive table tennis for years in Hong Kong, and even now, my hands shake before matches, my stomach hurts, and the fear of losing takes over. So, does this sound familiar to you? Joining me today is Ziyan. She is one of the representative of the Hong Kong sailing team. So, let's get real about how anxiety affects us and how to tackle it. So, first of all, what does performance anxiety look like for young athletes in competitive sports? So, for me, anxiety isn't just nerves, it's physical, like stomach pain, shaky hands, rushing points just to escape the pressure. I think it's the fear of disappointing others or myself. The expectation people have set for me, expecting me to achieve a good result. I have been experiencing this kind of performance anxiety for years, and I'm still finding ways to cope with it. So, Zian, have you been experiencing this in sailing, and how does it show up for you?
Okay, so first of all, I'm Ziyan. Thank you so much, Nicole, for your time and having me today. I also definitely look into performance anxiety on my own platform and podcast, Unstoppable. And it's something I've also experienced, as an athlete sailing for Hong Kong, and doing so many international competitions that are often very high pressure environments. So to me, what like obviously also shows up in a physical aspect, like you said, but to me, I feel the impacts a lot more on my mental state, and in a way, it's almost like a type of like cognitive or emotional erosion where because performance anxiety comes from a drive to do well in competitive sports, and because being an elite athlete and dedicating so much of your time to this requires so much passion and patience for the sport. Performance anxiety is really something that takes away a lot of that motivation that you have for your sport and replaces it with anxiety. And it makes you forget really why you're competing and why you're racing, in the first place. Performance anxiety is such like a strong desire to do well. I think it's so easy to slip into that downward spiral because once you have performance anxiety, you start doing worse, and then once you start doing worse, you get even more
Yeah,
performance anxiety. And so it's very difficult to escape that. It can really cripple your confidence and make you question basically everything that you're doing.
yeah, totally agree with you. Like, especially like you're talking about passion, like you used to like enjoy that sport like when you're young without like competing, but then when you're competing there's like rankings on that. You kind of I'm not sure like if you dislike, but you don't know what you're doing, like why why I'm so hardworking for that, why I'm practicing training days and days, what am I looking for? Like I am not like Hong Kong like representatives. I'm just like I should be enjoying that. But performance anxiety always takes that joy. It becomes like so much pressure that I'm thinking, what if I'm gonna lose in that match? Oh, what will others think about me? I always think the expectations that people have for us, like, oh, you're amazing, oh, you're really a good player, these are kind of like sometimes a pressure because you think
Exactly.
that you have to be amazing in order to have basically a credit, right? So I guess like performance anxiety for like young athletes, it's really a thing that we struggle a lot, and we're not taught in school like how do we cope with it, right? We're not, no one talks about like how do you do that. There's no guidebook. Everyone has their different coping strategies. So moving on to like coping strategies, what are some methods we use in overcoming performance anxiety? So I think that we can break into before and during competition. So for me, before matches, I found friendly competitions really useful. Like they're super helpful to stimulate the pressure that you might be experiencing in the real competition. And it also prepares me well for the competition. So I can say that I will have slightly more confidence in myself. So what are your prep before the competition?
So yeah, I definitely agree with you. I just wanted to touch on what you said earlier, and I really, really agree with what you said about how it's not talked about enough. And it's so easy to be lost, in this pressure, in these expectations, and forget why you're doing things because in the moment, results can seem very, very meaningless and very confusing as to why. For me personally, I struggled with this a lot back in 2023 when I was preparing for like the Asian Games. And right before the competition it got so bad up to a point where doing your sport or doing something that you supposedly love, right, really starts to feel like a burden. It starts to feel exhausting, terrible, and you don't have the motivation or the drive to do it, and you just feel very lost as like, why I'm doing this, why am I spending so much effort? And you can really let external factors get to you, right? So in terms of how to overcome that before a competition, I'd say that one of the very important things that I realized was focusing our mindset on process related goals, or focusing on the things in the process to reaching expectations or reaching goals, rather than opposed to focusing on the outcomes, right? Because at the end of the day, these outcomes are not things that we can control, but what we can control and what we can readily do, and also the steps we can make to, like you said, minimize the pressure that we feel, like entering competitions, friendlier competitions that help us figure out why, like, wow, I still really, really enjoy this. This is why I still started
Yeah.
doing this in the first place. So yeah, I think in terms of before a competition, I think just focusing on the steps that we can do, breaking them down into very completable, very achievable small things, instead of just thinking about having an existential crisis about the result, what it's going to be like. I think that's definitely one of the best ways.
Yeah, I think it's obviously to remind yourself to enjoy the process rather than focusing on the result, on like the rankings, on like that doesn't actually matter the most. I think that we should enjoy the process. Like, what do we get from the process? Like, what did we learn from the process rather than like, oh, did we win or did we lose?
Exactly.
So during the competition, I know like this might be slightly different from sailing when we're doing racket sports, right? So I think racket sports, it is very important to slow down and take time between points. Like maybe just going back to the court for 10 to 20 seconds. That's completely okay. Because excess anxiety always make me play too quickly. I'm just so frustrated and just want to get away from the court and pressure. So I'll start to rush between points because I want to get off the court as soon as possible because the pressure is on the court, right? So if I get out of the court, I'll escape the pressure. So this is why I often play too quickly in like games that I am losing. So I feel that it's important to slow down and take time between points. So what is something that you will do to cope during like matches?
Yeah, I think in
Yeah,
a way, in the ways that we cope with,
yeah,
performance anxiety and stress in the middle of competitions is
yeah,
actually maybe quite similar. So like table tennis, we also will probably have multiple races in one day,
yeah,
and in those kinds of situations, you will have like ten minutes maybe in between to kind of take a deep breath, reflect on what you just did. But because sailing is such a sport that each race is going to be completely different most of the
yeah,
time because we're playing with the elements, right? We're out in
yeah,
nature, these things are even more, let's say, out of our control.
yeah,
Not a single person can really 100% predict what's going to happen, right? So I think in a way it's also about taking it slowly. I mean, if you didn't do as well as you wanted in the first race, what's super important is to completely forget about it. Treat each race like it's a brand new one. Still put your best foot forward and don't let like maybe the stress or what you were upset about in the first race really affect you mentally for the second one, because that's going to influence your decisions making in the race. It's also going to influence your mindset and how you perform. So ultimately, if you feel upset in the first race, I would say the biggest thing is not to let that opportunity like ruin the next one that you have, because it's
Yeah.
anyone's game in the end. So
Glad that my coach has been one of my biggest supporter in my table tennis life, that I don't think he scolded me even I lost in like a match, but rather he keeps on guiding me through and teaching me not only the techniques, but also the mindset of enjoying the process, not the result. So how about for your sailing career? How can your coach create a supportive and like non-judgmental sports environment?
So I think definitely it's important to say that your coach having expectations for you or maybe being slightly disappointed in your performance or being impressed rather is very, very normal, right? Somebody having expectations for you to perform, to push you, to help you reach your best can also be like a very good thing, because it's easy for us to like not believe in ourselves, right? And to have like
Yeah,
an external force kind of telling you this is what you're capable of can be very helpful for. But of
yeah,
course, like too much of that, or maybe an insensitive amount of that, or approaching that in an insensitive way could be very detrimental to, an athlete or anybody's like mental health.
yeah,
So I think one of the most important things, like I said earlier, is um, when the best coaches really they know and they can tell when their athletes are maybe struggling or maybe kind of feeling a lot of pressure and a lot of anxiety. I think what the best coaches and what the best parents and support system really can do is, like you said, right, telling you to focus on the process, focus on the steps that you can achieve rather than to focus on the outcome that's going to come in the very, very end,
yeah,
which you're worried about, right?
yeah,
And it's also very important to emphasize that, these ups and downs, feeling more pressure, feeling worried, feeling anxious about something is very, very normal for everybody, right? It's totally acceptable. Nobody should ever freak out. Like, why am I worrying? Like, sometimes we worry
yeah,
about why we're
yeah,
worrying.
yeah,
Um, but I think what's really important and what the best coaches and like also in sailing what my coach really helps me with is just to telling me and again that was the last race, now focus on the next one, just reflect on it, take the lessons that you learned, and try and funnel that into your next race. What my parents really helped with is they emphasized to me that my results are not equivalent, are not representative of my worth or who I am as a person,
yeah,
like everything, right? And that's probably one of the bigger triggers for performance anxiety because just because of how closely sport and performance is intertwined with, athletes, right? It's easy for them to become muddled up. It's important to separate in a way or distance ourselves from time to time from these numbers on a scoreboard as opposed to, your personality, your character, and who you really are, right?
yeah. I totally agree with you because I think why we're always anxious about like for a competition is like we linked competition with our self-worth. We always
Exactly.
think that if we lose like in a competition, we are useless. We are not a good player anymore. So I always feel that like coach, like or parents should actually emphasize on like the process, not the result, not the outcome, for us to basically feel better like for the next match, not to be really anxious or frustrated about like the upcoming competition as if we lost in the previous matches.
I just feel that sometimes if it's not an athlete who's equating their self-worth, it's rather that they feel this guilt, that um, if I do badly, then I'm letting people down, that I'm wasting people's
Yeah,
time, that, all this effort, not just from myself, but from other people, is
yeah,
completely going to waste. And I think I actually had an interview with a Thai sailor who went to the Olympics once, and she told me she'd also kind of struggled with this similar stress. Um, and then she told me one of the most important things for her was that she really asked herself, like, if others believe in me, right? Because there's obviously reasons, there's evidence for others to believe in you, not just your parents or your coaches, but other people. So if others have the capacity to believe in ourselves, then why can't we believe in us too, right?
yeah,
So I think that's a really interesting thing.
yeah. So for example, like how do organization like mind the ways which both of us are the youth ambassador of it, like help normalize mental health in sports? Like for me, I think the most significant is to reduce the stigma on mental health, especially through role models, where the co-founders are the representatives of Hong Kong swimming team, and they will have an important impact in raising the awareness on mental health. Like they will be like normalizing that like athletes will also struggle. Like athletes are not gonna be like always at their best. They might feel anxious. They might also struggle, right? So I think it's really important to basically normalize that athletes or like basically human beings are gonna struggle. They are not gonna perform the best every single time.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you took exactly what I was going to say. And I totally agree with everything that you just said, you know. I think it's these organizations, especially when led by, you know, some of Hong Kong's like most most famous and most decorated, you know, athletes that have been to the Olympics and represented us, you know, on the global stage.
Yeah,
I think what it really helps to reinforce is that, you know, at the end of the day, right, everybody is human, and to make these
yeah,
mistakes is totally normal, totally
yeah,
human. Like, even though they're all Olympians, five-time Olympics, maybe Olympic medalists, you know,
yeah,
at the end of the day, they're not gods, right? They feel everything like we do, and they struggle even with the same things, maybe on a bigger capacity, maybe in different ways. I also think other organizations or other platforms, you know, like your podcast, that's all
yeah,
about mental well-being, and then other podcasts that people have, really interviewing people and spreading the message, I think is also very, very crucial, because initiatives from students like ourselves, I think, is very inspiring to other students and maybe other athletes, because it just shows that you don't have to go to 5 Olympics, or you don't have to be an Olympic medalist in order to make an impact, to share your story, to share things with other people. You can be a student who makes interviews other students and records
yeah,
things and uploads them, and people listen to
yeah,
them. And I think it's just so important to reduce this stigma and, you know, normalize mental health sports, like you said, right? Mental health in sports and in daily life, because
yeah,
the consequences of leaving these things unchecked and leaving them just to become like fester, um, are just, they only get worse and worse, right? Especially in our digital
yeah,
age, you know, with social media, everything has become a lot worse. And before, when I was researching, you know, about mental health as well, I came across like a very scary statistic that was almost like 1 in 4 young people in Hong Kong face mental health challenges,
yeah,
right? So it just showed you how common that is. Like in my school, maybe my class is 20 people. That means like 5 of them or 4 of them are going to be struggling. And these are people that I
yeah,
know. But the thing is, we might not even know that they're struggling, right? So I think what it also really helps is to stop people from feeling so lonely when they're struggling with these
yeah,
things. And even if they're not willing to come forward, or maybe if they're not comfortable with talking about it, just know that you're not alone. And also that there are systems in place. There are people who are willing to help you and willing to speak to you and willing to just listen to what you have to say.
yeah. I totally agree with you. Like, you don't have to be alone. And I guess, like, your friends, your teammates, your coach, if you're struggling, just ask them for help or just talk to them. I think it will make things better. So, as we wrap up for today, me and Zian also want to leave everyone with this. Like, sports should always be more than just medals and rankings. So as its core, the core about sports is about passion, growth, and basically having fun in it. But when anxiety starts dimming that joy, it's a sign that you might need a pause. You might need to rest. However, you don't have to struggle alone. Like, talk to someone, a coach who understands, a teammate who has been through, or even a professional who can give you some methods to cope with. Like, I want to emphasize that mental strength doesn't indicate that we never feel anxious, but instead how we go through it. So remind yourself why you love and enjoy the sports, and every win or lose is actually making you stronger. So thank you,
Exactly.
Zian, for joining us in this conversation on sharing a lot insight on mental health in sports as a professional athlete. To everyone that is listening, I hope that you do enjoy the episode on performance anxiety in sports. Bye, and we will see you in the next episode.
Yeah,
Bye.
thanks a lot. Bye.